Okay, so let's continue on. Last video we talked about marketing, sports marketing, and a basic understanding of it. We're now going to kind of shift gears and focus more on sports marketing and why it's unique, on how it's different from other forms of marketing. So we look at the sport product. Many industries are defined by their gross domestic product. But the gross domestic sport product is essentially the size of the industry. In 1995, in the United States, it was the 11th largest industry at $152 billion estimated. In 2002, that jumped. Only 7 years later, another essentially 40 billion with a B. In 2011, that's already doubled. And today, it's estimated at $620 billion. That is a huge number. There are a lot of jobs, and when we talk about the size of the sport industry, we're talking professional sport, participant sport, we're talking a variety of things. And so a lot of people think, well, if you don't work in professional sport, then there's no job for you in sports. That's definitely not true. It's the opposite. And so keep your mind open to, there are a lot of jobs in the professional sport industry, but also there are many elsewhere. So let's kind of look at expenditure. This is a estimate of the total expenditure of the average person in the United States based on the year. So as you can see, this is 1970s. 81.3%, or the biggest part of the pie, is based on personal expenses. So that would be things that keep you alive, food and shelter and clothing and all of that. The rest of it is what we call discretionary spending. It's the spending above and beyond your basic needs. And so the consumer in the 1970s spent a good deal of money on sport or sport-related products. 3.9% in admissions, 8.2% for amusement. And this can also include other entertainment activities such as concerts or amusement parks, Disney World, those types of things. And then 6.6% of their expenditure was on video, audio, and computer equipment. Think about technology in the 1970s wasn't as prevalent as it is today for the personal use. Move on to the 1980s, those numbers changed a little bit. As you can see, our personal expense decreased, but so did our sports spectatorship admissions. We did see an increase in personal amusement as well as audio-video equipment. In the 1990s, guess what happened? We started to see more personalized technology, things you can use yourself, and money is starting to be spent more on technology than on other activities. And as you can see, sports spectatorship or admissions prices also decreased. Then you can see consumer personal amusement in 2002, which is the most recent data that I can find, can show that there is this shift towards personalization as well as video, audio, and computer equipment, which if you think about, many of that now includes subscriptions to different platforms on the web as well as broadcast of events. And so we see a little bit increase in spectator admissions, but not a lot. If you look, I've highlighted a few things. Attendance by the year in 2010 was where this data came out. Attendance in the thousands were at 49,671 per thousand. Attendance in NFL was less than that, about half. Major League Baseball attendance was greater. We had more games. Basketball attendance is 32. Attendance in women's basketball was 1,100. Interesting to look at women's basketball in the 1990s. Look at the attendance on the very far left is 2,777, and today it's in the 11,000 as well. In 2010 it was. Regular season attendance for National Hockey League has also increased. So you can see these trends of increasing in attendance. Our job is to, as marketers, understand why this is the case. Well, one reason is what the sport consumer has going against them. So, for example, the first one is competition. There's different things that influence them. Other leagues, other teams influence how we behave. If you have a chance, go check out WWF version of football. It's called the XFL. Those are interesting. That's one example of a league competing against another league. The NFL, the AFL against this extreme football league, which obviously didn't work out since you've never heard of it, or you may have never heard of it. In the 1960s, similar thing occurred in that you had the Continental League versus Major League Baseball and the American versus the National Football League. Well, why did Major League Baseball make it over Continental League? A lot of it had to do with collusion. And that's a naughty word in business in the sense that that's not something that is legal, yet it's something that happened and today is still seen as being legal. What we mean by that is essentially teams in Major League Baseball said to one another, well, we will only play other teams in Major League Baseball, and since we have some of the better teams, while there may be some good elsewhere and players good in the Continental League, we won't play other teams outside of Major League Baseball. They basically said we're only going to compete against one another. This basically led spectators as well as athletes to realize the higher quality game was in Major League Baseball. And so they said, you know what, I'm going to spend my money on a Major League Baseball game because it's a better quality event. And so things like that, competition working together in some respects and against one another in others, has led to a lot of things. NCAA rules also is an impact. 2002, the NCAA Division I football teams had attendance requirements. So what did some of these teams do? Well, in order to keep your status as Division I-A, you got to do some things to try to increase attendance. Lafayette had a petting zoo to try to increase families at the games. The San Jose Sharks had a theme night. There was a college that, off the top of my head, I can't remember who it was, but offered a concert with Snoop Dogg at the end of the game. And they said your ticket to the game gave you entrance into the concert, which was on the field. Oh, and by the way, you have to be here by halftime. Why do you think they had to be there by halftime? Because NCAA says official attendance records occur at halftime. So the number of tickets that have been taken at halftime is the attendance for the game. And so it's really, they paid for a concert and watched some of them half of a football game. So competition's a big part of that. Another thing is television has influenced our consumers. In the past, we really didn't see a whole lot, meaning before the 1970s, where satellite technology, in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, where we see fiber optic cables really being used and increase in satellite usage. Really, globally, you couldn't watch games. 1950s when we first started to see televisions in homes. And so before that, it was mainly radio. Big changes in just 50, 60, 70 years. But all to be said, the reason why the NBA is so popular today, specifically in China, is because of what they've been able to do with Michael Jordan and the Dream Team and the broadcast of technology in the 1990s. Another example is grassroots participation. Grassroots, if you think of how it's defined, it's from the roots up, meaning grass grows from the roots up, and the same would be the case if we're talking about sport. Well, how do we get people more involved in sport? Well, a lot of it comes with their previous childhood experiences, and therefore we know that if we get children more involved, we know that's a big issue in our nation today. We know that other leagues and individuals have done well at this as well. If we get our youth involved in the sport, in turn they'll be more likely to be involved in the activities later on. If you look for the European model, what a lot of these teams do is they'll have these developmental leagues where a 4, 5, 6-year-old can start playing for that club. They can say, for example, me being a big Germany fan, Bayern Munich is the team in Munich, has teams of 4, 5, 6-year-olds that play for Bayern Munich. There's a lot of them, and as the age increases, the selectiveness of who plays in these leagues increases as well, and so fewer and fewer players are part of it. But let's just say somebody makes it to their teens, right? 15, 16 years old, are playing for Bayern Munich, don't make the final cut, they decide to do something else with their life. Instead of play professional soccer, what are they now? For the rest of their life, they're going to know, I grew up on Bayern Munich's team. They're going to look on the field and see, hey, I played against that guy. And so a big part of grassroots participation is what influenced our consumers as well. This is an interesting quote. It came from an American author. It says, the man who uses Callaway golf clubs, drives a Jaguar, and wears Ralph Lauren apparel makes a statement about his identity. I'll come back to that in a second. He is a man that is separate and apart from the man who uses pin fishing reels, drives the Dodge Durango, and wears Levi's. Identity is a big part of this. Each one of these individuals that were just described probably look differently in your mind. They may be stereotypes, but all that to be said is they have different behaviors, and all of that goes back to what they want to be seen as in their identity, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. Okay, I wear Levi jeans because I like the way that makes me feel as far as a consumer. Another interesting quote I like is from a London Times article. It says, American football is an occasion at which dancing girls, bands, tactical huddles, and television commercial breaks are interrupted by short bursts of play. That's so true. I mean, if you think about the way, if you take a step back and look at somebody who maybe never really enjoyed that sport or grew up with that sport, American football is completely different. These are all pictures that I got off the web that, yes, those aren't dancing girls at the Dallas Cowboys stadium. Drumline and tactical huddles and commercial breaks. All of this changes the way you think about sport if you take a step back and look at it. So there are 5 unique characteristics that you need to know about, or things that make the sports marketing so unique. The first one, I know there are 2 of them, but the first one is that the sport product in the event form is invariably intangible and subjective. In other words, the customer views each event differently than the person sitting next to them. And every fan leaves not with something tangible. They might buy a foam finger or a hat or catch a foul ball, but really the only thing every consumer is leaving with is memories. So it's intangible, you can't touch it and take it home with you. And it's subjective in that I might have had a great time at the game and you were sitting right next to me and may not have. Our job as marketers is to understand those differences between people and try to understand our target market. The sport product is also inconsistent and unpredictable. Back in 2015, Golden State Warriors went 73-9 and lost in the championship game. You can't guarantee. You may have the best record ever. That's not going to mean you're going to win the championship. That's not going to mean you're going to win the next game. Your star players may get hurt. It all goes back to this idea of we can't guarantee a win. If we as marketers start guaranteeing wins, then we're making promises we can't keep. What's great about the sport product is that it is inconsistent and unpredictable, which brings people back in the future. If everybody knew that their team was going to blow the other team out by 100-0 every single game, eventually it would get old and people would stop watching, right? At the end of the day, we want to see some sort of competition, and that's what makes sports marketing unique. So as marketers for sport products, we cannot guarantee a win or quality, especially in the event format. So what can we guarantee? So if we can't do that, we have to place a greater emphasis on the product extensions rather than the core product itself. In other words, if you see Justin Bieber here on the left, when people stopped becoming interested in the core product, meaning his singing, he started to change his look. Whether you think that's good or bad, that's your own opinion. But if you cannot control the core product, in our circumstance in sports marketing, the game, then you have to guarantee the sizzle. In other words, if you can't guarantee the steak is going to be good, at least make the sizzle sound good. Satisfy the needs and wants of your sport fans. And a lot of that has to go with the product extensions at sporting events, the concession, the parking, the entertainment options at the game. If you can't guarantee what's going to happen on the field is going to be a good outcome for you being the fan, you hopefully are, as marketers, working towards making sure everything off the field is of high quality. I believe this is the 4th one. The sport product in the event form is a perishable commodity. The picture here is a picture of my wife and I holding tickets to the FIFA World Cup's women's game in Germany in 2011. USA played France in Mönchengladbach, Germany. We were there for a study abroad with my students. That ticket I have at home, I bet I couldn't sell that ticket to anybody for more than 25 cents. Why? Because that game happened in 2011. You can't sell a ticket to yesterday's game. At the same time that the product is produced, it is also consumed. So the most important thing to think about here is expectations and competition are critical in pre-selling. In other words, you have expectations of having a good game. What can we control? We can't control the outcome of the game. We control the product extensions. And so if we understand it's a perishable commodity, then our job is to ensure that everybody has a good time. The last one is that sport is publicly consumed and customer satisfaction is invariably affected by social facilitation or lack thereof. In other words, very few people, you're probably included in this, less than 2% of people is what our statistics show, attend sporting events alone, meaning they go with somebody else. It is a social activity. It goes back to this identity thing I said earlier. Our social identity comes from our behaviors and the things we do. Sport is an avenue where a lot of people express their identity or try to change their identity. When I came to SFA, I bought SFA-related apparel. Why? Was I an SFA fan yet? No, I hadn't even been to a game yet. But I wanted to be seen as part of the in-group. Basically, I wanted to walk around campus and have pride for the university I work for, while at the same time supporting athletics, obviously because I teach sports marketing. But my identity started to change when I started to become a fan of SFA. Lumberjack is a culture that is different than really any other university I've been at, and many in the world. And so understanding the identity that comes from your behaviors, your thought process, is this idea of social identity theory. It makes you wonder why you would do something like this. And remember, going into this, I'm an A&M fan, so this makes me a little angry just looking at it. Just kidding. So, why is sports marketing different from other forms of marketing? Well, first of all, the sport marketing, the sport product evokes such a strong personal identification, emotional attachment to the sport, unlike any other. You would rarely find somebody walking around the street with a cheese head and their face painted and not think they're the Green Bay Packers. Or you wouldn't see somebody walking around town with a Macintosh, the Apple, painted on their face. You would go, that's kind of weird, right? They're just computers. But this is not weird. You would go, okay, yeah, that must be a Packers fan. A little weird that they're walking down the street like that, but you get the point. Or make you do this. And yes, that is a picture of a guy not wearing a shirt. Is this making you awkward yet? Okay, I'll change it. Or make you love like this, love life like this. I'm an A&M fan, as I said, and so there's strong emotional connections that come from being a fan. You start to celebrate the successes of the team when you really had nothing to do with it. This is the term called burging, or basking in reflective glory. Basking in reflective glory is the we phenomenon. We won, we did great. You didn't really have a whole lot to do with it when you sat on your couch and watched it at home. But all to be said is people try to attach themselves to winning brands. So associating yourselves with winning is known as burging. The opposite also occurs when you try to disassociate yourself from a brand. That is called corfing, or casting off reflective failure. The they phenomenon. They lost, they did terrible. There's also a third one, and it's usually used less, but it's called burfing. Basking in spite of reflected failure. So even though they lost, I'm still a supported fan. We didn't do so hot, we didn't win, but it's still the we. And so the whole point is that burging and corfing and burfing are all behaviors that indicate the emotional attachment you have with the brand. That's unique. You don't see somebody go, oh man, I own stock in this company and we did really great in the last fourth quarter, or they did really terrible. You might say that, but in all likelihood, you're not associating yourself with successes other than the fact that you're an owner. Also, sport has an almost universal appeal and pervades all elements of life. In other words, every person in our society has some sort of recreational or sport-related activity that they are part of. Maybe some people may be more enthusiastic about it. Some people may be more excited about it. But when it's all said and done, somebody has some sort of connection with sport. And so we have to find the target markets that are most relevant to our brand. In a separate video I'm just going to record this video of team handball. I want you to watch that and see what we're talking about. Something that's different, that is growing all over the world, yet not so much in the United States, but has seen to be growing more in recent years. Another thing is sport is both a consumer and industrial good, and that sport is produced to meet the needs and wants of the everyday person, the consumer, meaning the spectator or the participant, but also being used for commercial purposes, the industrial good. So businesses trying to market themselves through sport. Rarely do you see a industry where that occurs simultaneously. You also see sport organizations both compete and cooperate, meaning they're competing on the field, but at the same time off the field they're cooperating. They want to support each other. Going back to the idea of the the Major League Baseball versus the Continental League I was mentioning earlier. You're working together, you're colluding, but at the same time you're competing on the field. Another example of this is in college athletics, specifically college football. When a team from a conference, or when a team goes to a bowl game and they win that bowl game, they receive some essentially prize money, like a boxing match would. That prize money primarily goes to the winning school. However, a percentage of that goes back to the conference and then is distributed to all of its members. So while you might be a UT fan, University of Texas fan, and you're in the Big 12, when Baylor goes to a bowl game, normally you wouldn't root for them if they compete against anybody else because they're a rival. You're still going to root for them to win that game because your team is going to earn money when they win that game. And so this is why you see people rooting for rivals, as long as they're not playing your own. And then also, no other business other than sport do people, the average everyday person, simplistically view the sport as them being experts. In other words, they view themselves as experts of sport. As a not scientific study at all, but Miller Lite did a report, said 52% of fans feel like they could play at the professional level. That's 52% of the people that sit on their couch at home watching the game say, I could do that. You probably know some people like that. 74% said they could officiate the game better. I'm a sports official, and I guarantee you that's not the case. Well, I guess when you see replay 20 times, it's a little bit easier to make the call. And then 51% of people say they coach. I think that last one, the 51% of people think they could coach at the professional level, comes from the idea that I did okay in my fantasy sports league. I could coach these guys. So, all that to be said, those are some reasons why sports marketing is different from other forms of marketing.